The 60th anniversary of Doctor Who is still over a year away, yet the excitement and the rumour mill surrounding who might be in it, and more so which Doctors might be returning, is only growing by the day. A Doctor Who anniversary special and a multi-Doctor story are two things that we assume go hand in hand. We've had the 3 Doctors, which celebrate the 10th anniversary, the 5 Doctors, which celebrate the 20th anniversary, and the Day of the Doctor, which celebrated the 50th anniversary, each of which saw Doctors past returning and meeting one another. As for the 60th, the only confirmation we've had so far when it comes to returning Doctors is David Tennant returning alongside Catherine Tate and the late Bernard Cribbins. Still not quite over it. In what could be a multi-Doctor story with Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, that is still to be seen. Or it could be a separate independent special of its own starring David Tennant as the only Doctor. But what about the other Doctors, from both the classic and the modern eras? Let's run through each Doctor and explore the likeliness of them returning, giving them a rating out of 10 as to how likely I think they'll return. The classic Doctors. It's easier to wrap up all the classic Doctors together in one beautifully sized bow. From the first Doctor all the way to the 8th Doctor, will we see any of these classics reprise their roles? I think there's a chance we might see 1 or 2, but maybe not exactly playing their Doctors. One issue, of course, with classic Doctors returning is, well, age. We're all suffering from it and it will catch up with us all one day. So the question is, can the classic Doctors realistically reprise their role while looking much older than they did from their respective eras? Now this is of course unlikely, but not impossible. We've seen Tom Baker returning as the Doctor/Curator in the 50th, and Peter Davison return in Time Crash with a throwaway line quite easily explaining him looking older. And if all else fails, we might even see a classic Doctor recast, like David Bradley did with the first Doctor, although I think he earned the right to return as the first Doctor, following his incredible performance in Adventure in Space and Time. Plus, I don't think any other actor has earned the right to just rock up in a centenary special or an anniversary special and portray a Doctor like Bradley did. He earned the right to be the first Doctor. So the chances of another Doctor appearing recasted, I think, is very unlikely. We could see another Curator type character, as it worked perfectly well before and had no complaints from fans. Or maybe the classic actors themselves could just make a very brief cameo as an extra, walking down a street maybe. I personally hope the actors get to be in it no matter who they play, as I think their absence in the 50th was one of its very few criticisms. So as a classic Doctor returning in full, I think it's not impossible, just a bit unlikely. If I'm going to put my money on any of the classic Doctors returning, I'd probably say Sylvester McCoy, probably Paul McGann, as he could still slip right in to that 8th Doctor suit tomorrow. But we'll have to wait and see if that's the case. So right now, a classic Doctor returning, I'd say 3 out of 10. The 9th Doctor. Now I think we all lived in hope when Christopher Eccleston joined Big Finish that surely a return to the TV show was inevitable. I mean, this is the same guy who once said he'd never play the Doctor again. Then he did, with Big Finish. The same guy who said he'd never do conventions. Then did. I've met him at LFCC. And is the same guy who said in multiple interviews that he would never return to the TV show. So, will he? Unfortunately, I think the chances are extremely low, if not impossible. Chris was interviewed and has been many times, but he did tell crowds at an Australian convention this, and I quote, "I've never been a fan of multi-Doctor stories. When I worked on the series, I had really strong ideas about what works and what doesn't, and I always think that multi-Doctor stories are a bit of a cash-in and a bit of exploitation. Creatively, they've never worked for me. I looked at the script for the 50th anniversary and I felt as soon as I said I wasn't doing it, it got better because, well, if I'm not in it, it's better. The creation of the War Doctor introduced a whole new facet to the canon. The 9th Doctor in particular is a one-man band, definitely. So he doesn't work with other Doctors. If you want me back, you'd get me on my own. Plus, Eccleston has also stated many times at conventions that one of the biggest reasons he left was because he creatively fell out with Russell T Davies and Julie Gardner big time, and it seems like even now, all these years later, he's still very much not over it. So, if the chance of Christopher Eccleston returning as the Ninth Doctor with any old showrunner was small enough, under Russell T Davies, I think the chances are impossible. I'm going to go with a 1 out of 10. The 11th Doctor. Matt Smith was the youngest actor to take on the role of the Doctor, so you'd assume he'd be the most obvious Doctor to return once, if not more times. However, I'm not 100% sold that he will, or that he can. Matt has been quoted as recently as August of this very year in saying this: "Maybe, if it was the right script. I mean, I don't know if I've got too old now. It would have to be really right." Now, this at least shows that the door isn't completely closed on Matt returning. However, he clearly has his doubts, and he would need a few things like the script to be right. Now, this does make perfect sense. He is an actor, first and foremost, after all. However, the comment about Matt's age is a strange one. He'll be 40 by the time the 60th comes around, which, yes, does make me feel terribly old, considering I remember when he took on the role at only 26, and I'm 26 now. But he'll still be by far the youngest actor who could possibly return, so he could still easily slip back into that bow tie. The only big issue, I think, is his availability. With his age, it means he's still very young and very busy with other roles, especially the one like House of Dragon, for instance. So even if Matt was desperate to come back, his schedule simply might not allow it. So I'm torn on this one. I'm right down the middle. Circumstances could decide whether we see him pop up in the 60th. So I'm going to go with a 5 out of 10. The 12th Doctor. Straight after his exit in Christmas of 2017, I'd have had Peter Capaldi as a guarantee to return to Doctor Who for the 60th. I'd have put my mortgage on it. He's a lifelong Doctor Who fan who adores the show, and I thought he would jump at the next opportunity to return. However, his comments since tell a completely different story. In August of 2021, Capaldi was quoted in saying, "I wouldn't really fancy that. There are so many Doctors now. I'm quite happy with what I did, you know? I loved my time on Doctor Who, but I think the more multi-Doctor stories you have, the less effective they are, really." Now, this gives me the impression that Peter is happy with where he left the role and would be content in leaving his Doctor there. And it also kind of shows that he's very proud and meticulous about his work and would maybe see his Doctor's value negatively affected by a return alongside other Doctors. His comments about the number of Doctors now is also extremely intriguing, maybe suggesting his dislike for the timeless child, and that the number of Doctors to which there now could be kind of devalues the role to him and the character, and that's something I kind of agree with. The fact that anyone could now be the Doctor, I think, takes away that special, unique feeling that past actors may have had when they were the Doctor, or have been the Doctor. Whereas before, they felt like they were lucky enough to be part of this exclusive club, whereas they're not really anymore. Plus, there have been rumours, and I must stress these are rumours, that he was potentially forced out in 2017 when Chibnall adamantly wanted a female Doctor, and that once Stephen Moffat wanted to leave, the writing was on the wall for Capaldi's Doctor, regardless of if he wanted to leave or not. Now, we don't know if that's true, and if he does hold any resentment towards the show or the BBC, but it certainly cast doubts over if he'll return or not. It's went from what I thought would be a sure thing to something that doesn't sound like it'll actually happen. Plus, with Peter being 64 now, I feel like it's now or never for a return, and sadly, and honestly, I'm not convinced. My gut's telling me I don't think he'll return, so I'm going to go with a 4 out of 10. The 13th Doctor. Now, Jodie is a really interesting one because the 60th will be the very next episode after her departure, so I think a return directly after that would make her leaving make absolutely no sense. She may as well have stayed on for that one more episode, or even the start of the 60th, like the 7th Doctor returned for the start of the TV movie, just to fulfill that regeneration scene to say that she was actually in it, so she could have met other Doctors in the 60th and maybe regenerate then, but yeah, it just doesn't really make logistical sense for her to return straight away, and I think it would take a lot from her regeneration. That's if we actually see a regeneration in the centenary. Because unlike other Doctors, Jodie's return isn't just down to outside circumstances or where the actors are in their career now. Her return also relies on the current narrative. Will we even see her regenerate in the centenary? If we do, then the chances of her returning I think are quite slim. But if we don't see her regenerate, and we only see her disappear into the sunset of outer space, then she could easily pop back up for a surprise cameo in the very next episode and possibly regenerate in the 60th instead. Plus, I think the opportunity of seeing a male and female Doctor interact is too tempting and too great for the writers to refuse. I think it would be a big moment for the show, and it's one that they will take, even if it does possibly damage the effect of her regeneration which shortly happened prior. Jodie was quoted at the start of 2022 in saying this: "For all the people to pass the baton on to, I mean, it's an absolute honour and joy. It's certainly in the safest and most exciting hands, and what a wonderful time for the show. Once you're in Doctor Who, you never want to leave. I suppose it gave me a bit of hope, like, oh, when you do leave, it doesn't necessarily mean you leave forever." So, when better for a return straight after you've just left? It's like you've never been away. Is it too soon for Jodie to return? Yes, in my opinion. Do I think it will happen? Honestly, I think it will. I think, regardless of what happens in the centenary, we'll see the 13th Doctor in the 60th, whether that's rightfully for the narrative or wrongfully. So I'm going to go with a solid 7 out of 10. Now, of course, there are other possibilities that they could bring, I don't know, a new Doctor into it, like John Hurt's War Doctor or Joe Martin's Fugitive Doctor in episodes previously. But following the Timeless Children, I don't want to see any other Doctors appear that aren't the full-time canonised Doctors. Unless the plot absolutely requires it, like the War Doctor replacing a spot originally written for the 9th Doctor, I don't want to see anyone else returning or appearing. Looking back through these options, it to me seems more unlikely that we will see any other Doctors than I first thought we would. Maybe the 60th will be just an episode with the 10th Doctor. Maybe it's a special of him just on his own. Ncuti might appear at the end at some point and make it a multi-Doctor story, and that could be that. At first, months back, years back, I thought we might get individual specials, like a 10th Doctor special with David Tennant, a separate one with the 11th Doctor, and maybe a special one with, I don't know, the 12th Doctor or possibly even the 9th Doctor in the greatest of dreamlands. But thinking now, with all the time we've had to see filming pictures and possible things get leaked and announcements being made months ago, I don't think we're going to see any other Doctors return who aren't the 10th or the most recent Doctor being the 13th Doctor. And I'm not even sure we'll see them all together. So the longer we go without any kind of spoilers or set picks, I think it seems more likely that only the 10th Doctor will be returning fully on screen in an episode with prominent appearances. And other Doctors, they might be appearing as cameos at the very most. So as it stands, I'm going to say the 60th will consist of Ncuti Gatwa, David Tennant, and possible cameos from maybe Matt Smith, and most certainly Jodie Whittaker. But I could be wrong. All 14 might appear. Or is it 15? Or is it all 16? Or is it 116? I don't know anymore. So guys, there are the Doctors I think we might see in the 60th or in some special in some capacity around that time in 2023. If you've enjoyed this video, as always, do hit the like button and subscribe for more, and do hit that bell so you never miss when we upload here on the channel. We've got some massive stuff coming and an important announcement dropping very, very soon. As always, do comment in the section below your thoughts on which Doctors you think we could see return in the 60th and to what capacity you think they will appear. But until then guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.